Our session was more of a conversation than a workshop, I would say, and it was entitled Curating Value in Local and Global Contexts. I think we spent most of the time unpacking the title, and we still didn't really arrive anywhere. So global, what do we mean by global? So we had a conversation about the oppressiveness of the idea of the word global. However, some in the group felt that it's not to be dismissed when you're working in isolation, so that having some kind of global perspective provides some connection outside of one's smaller situation. And then another participant talked about having access to other perspectives, other cultural perspectives and histories provides us with resources, which then brought up the idea of history and resources, and what do we mean by resources? Resources as knowledge, or resources as related to the global economy, resources in terms of sharing, and then of course that takes us right to the topic of value, and that is, how do we value what we do? There was this idea, I think Jay Panther was in our group, he was in our group, but I think he talked about the weird local, which is this sort of touring a certain idea. He referenced postmodern release technique, which then comes to a community in South Africa and then goes somewhere else in New York and maybe Chile, but it's this weird local that is disconnected, or has no connection to any local community. So it's sort of moving around, and how does that operate? As sort of a desire, as one participant said, for a dynamic understanding between individuals from different disciplines and cultures. Value, we were talking about value and curation as an anti-consumerist intervention. And then we sort of ended with, I was saying we need to acknowledge the privilege and power of curation, even if we come from circumstances without a lot of financial resources. Also a call for need for humility as a part of an ethical practice, both locally and in any situation where one finds oneself acting and responding as a curator. And anyone in my group, if you want to add anything, that's what I have. Thank you.
Yeah, we are going to be two talking. Yeah, I'm Jalili Atiku.
I'm Antonia Tretter, and we had a very heated discussion yesterday on the notion of colonialization and decolonialization. And first of all, he asked us what expectations we would have on that notion and what we could imagine would be an empowerment through this notion. And perhaps I named some of the big words we discussed. So we talked about techniques of power, techniques of translation, process, freedom, empowerment, new energies through transmission, and about the provoking potential of this notion.
Yeah, and one important word that came is who named things. Who named things. If you want to actually create, you have to find the accurate valuation and the vocabulary that suits yourself, not that suits the next person. We have to have a translation, transmission, empowerment, reconstruction, redefinition, and the power to feel. Then, above all, you have to be flexible. Thank you.
Okay, hello. My workshop was entitled Developing Criteria and Setups for Intercontinental Curating. Big topic. There had been many questions in the room yesterday, and I had listed a few more here in this little text. We basically agreed that we wouldn't try to find answers because they're so monolithical, but rather develop a few strategies or propose a few strategies, talk about a few strategies. And so, knowing that these strategies are always only temporarily right, and that they probably have to be developed and changed all the time. So I'm just going to give you a list of the strategies that we discussed. First of all, awareness. Of course, awareness of all the problematics around curation, that is obvious, but also awareness of the fact that money always comes with conditions, and maybe out of that developing the strategy of maybe hijacking the missions you get with money and sometimes do things no one asked for with the money. Awareness of the role of cultural institutions in political agendas, so awareness of the role that we also play, that we are being used in a way also for political agendas eventually. And awareness, of course, of the fact that every strategy also has a downside, so always consider that one as well. Second strategy would be affirmativeness. So maybe rather than always defending critical positions, sometimes it's more effective to challenge the narrative by pretending things are the way they should be. Another strategy could be lack of intention. So always also provide space for doing things that have no productive output. This has been discussed here yesterday already. Then another strategy, a very important one for me, would be commitment. Commitment by presence also, by physical presence, which means invest in relations. It means follow people and follow organic procedures. Then another strategy would be change the body of reference. Another one, enlarging your perspective beyond them and us. Meaning also discover the pluralism of local audiences, for example, that we is not a homogenic figure, if it has ever been one, and also displace yourself to change perspective constantly. Then we discussed about contextualization, pros and cons. Do we need it? Is it harmful? Does it help? We didn't come to an answer, but just we're aware of the fact that you always create some kind of context, if you do it on purpose or not. Another strategy that we didn't really discuss, but we sort of applied it yesterday, so I wanted to bring it up, was to play, so to be playful, to play tricks, to expose yourself also, to not be afraid of contradiction, of uncertainty, or of complicated feelings, to use humor and wit also as strategies. And then last strategy maybe to communicate and to especially very much integrate in this thought of communication, also the communication towards audiences. Yes, that's already quite a lot. Thank you to the very nice and inspiring group. We had a really interesting talk.
Hi, my name is Ahmed Al-Attar. I am not going to speak about the workshop yesterday because I find it, I'm not good in taking notes, and not in college, not now. I find it very reductive. I just want to say it was a really good conversation. There were 4 people. They're great. We had a good time talking, exchanged a lot about the subject, and I cannot resume it in 5 minutes. So, thank you.
Hello, Rahel. You want to? Okay, so we came back to our session after lunch, and it was not going according to the original frame of processing the festival and empowering audiences and thinking about the audiences. But Rahel from our group is going to report. And Rahel, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I don't want to report on everything, but I think there's one focus and one topic we dwelled upon for a longer time, and that is our approach to micro and macro politics and how we actually, the relation of macro and micro politics in our practical work as funders, curators, and also as researchers. So we were asking the question, how and where does this relation between micro and macro politics play out in our practical work? And we agreed that the one example was the relation between economics and the production of art, and which is of course also closely related to the value of art. So we were asking the question again that was posed in the morning, how can the curator work in order to facilitate another logic, namely his own micro kind of logic? And there were two very concrete approaches to this. One was deconstructing value as a curatorial tool, so not spending money economically, for example, but splurging. So not going with the logic every let's say performance has to have a ticket sale of 1/3 of its budget. No, you splurge money because you curate kind of like face-to-face performances, and the money you put into this, the funding money does not come back in ticket sales. So that would be kind of one radical curatorial approach. The other one was work within your own micropolitics, which means also be transparent in your curatorial decisions. And this means kind of explain why you are choosing this and that. Maybe it's a different logic than the macro logic, but that's okay if you are transparent. Yeah. Any comments on this from my group? I mean, from the group? Yes?
Just the note I have, border thinking as a way of going forward. That's what I had. So I think it's a nice buzzword, border thinking.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I was asked to sort of sum up Rolf's workshop, which was on artists and curators, a dialogue between cooks and chefs. And the interesting bit, and I'm literally going to retrace the line we took for a walk, because it was basically a workshop or a conversation that took us through our lives. And as Zuli was part of this workshop, and she's already summed up a bit about the Möbius trip we had to face and our respective lifelines. So just to sort of take you through this process very quickly, we started, but because it seemed very randomly and defocused, which was unsettling, unnerving, and in a way I thought, God, are we going to get anywhere in this very brief time, which actually costs a lot and is quite dear, and will it have an effect to start without focus? So we started with our sort of the way we understand ourselves in relation to curation, and mapped out what our respective professions were, or how we saw ourselves as in terms of this curation thing, and then why you choose to be there. Exactly, and so we quickly came to this question mark. So how do these different lines in our respective lives link to each other? And so the question mark was right in the middle of this paper. And then we realized that it's all a matter of time, and this will only add up through time, and will only make sense if we let this evolve. And the way we described, or each one of us described the process, was that we were doing different things. You have these tiny dots here. Those are projects that might sort of where the question mark is taking us, that it's the search in a way, and like one project you might have might include one question mark, one of these dots, another one might not, and they will all go together at one point. And like the Möbius trip, as is very visible from this one here, and so there was already sort of maybe the very clear-cut boundary or what words can do and what visuals can do, and that sort of the idea of the image should be respected, and also in terms of, once again, of thinking about it in diagrams, that here you have chronos, and maybe we should add here you've got bias. And I noted down one thing, because what you can see here, to get through this kind of life and through this kind of idea of curating, and curating your own life, curating projects, getting other people involved, you don't need a method. But what you really need is, wrote down, you don't need a method, you need a biography. And maybe it's like the Berlin Wall, which could only be like the one we've got next door there, or outside in the park, it could only be sort of destroyed from within. And one participant commented that the house you've got here can only be built from within, and that's kind of the curator we really want. The one who allows for a process, facilitates a process, is a processor himself of the process and of his own life, and the germination, that it's kind of the seed that gets this sort of flower house, like really good Kew Gardens, you might think. And for this we don't need methods, and that's the important thing. Never think of a method if you're thinking of yourself as a curator, as a teacher, because we also noted that a school teacher might be a curator. Then there are so many different, and you talked about the health system right now, it's also interesting in those terms, but that the word techne might be much more important, because the question mark we have right in the middle here really is sort of very alchemical. This whole curation thing in the end is sort of between soul and breath, and that this question mark is what everything boils down to. And if it's properly fed like a plant that's given life or light and so life, it becomes the backbone of society as well, and it's surrounded by all the participants in that process, be they artists or curators. And I'd just like to finish by sort of pointing out that just a second. Sorry. First of all, so the whole thing started off with the title of the workshop, which we didn't discuss much, only in terms of sort of how food and the artistic creation are so similar. The creation of food or good food and a good artistic product, and in terms of sort of the sorry, I just need to check this here. What you mentioned in your talk, the curator, that it became a profession at one point in time, and maybe we could link that back to the architect, that only emerged in the Renaissance, when paper was suddenly available, much cheaper, and then there was a split between the craftsman and the architect. Maybe that's, and that links nicely sort of to Lydia Clark, and also, so if we kind of have this process here, and what this cut-off curator, like the moralist, would do, or maybe Moliere's misanthrope, is to present this as the ready-made entity, but not as this ongoing thing which we are given an insight into. And here you've got the door, very important in every house. So think of it in terms of those artists becoming curators, maybe Lynn Hickson and Matthew Goulash. Every house has a door, and you might enter, and I would encourage you strongly to go to the hopefully soon reopened Neue Pinakothek and just check again when you stand in front of Cézanne's the cutting, like the railway cutting made in 1870, and I think we completely underestimate the breakthrough of this painting. We're always told it's a breakthrough, but in terms of curation, we really, I think that, like taking Klee literally, we need to take a line for walk and go back to Cézanne in terms of what you're doing, and sort of eat that earth and really think about the sort of earth eating and the Möbius strip, how that links, and that, I mean, the whole snake thing. It's so you realize we kind of just began to tap into the link between mythology and eating and, yeah, eating art, maybe what that might do to our digestive systems. Thank you. You want to...
Thank you, it was fantastic. She's so nice. Incredible. Now, just to remember this image, because it's the other image that you draw. This is a kind of work of art or curating where the form, this house that is built, no? The knowing body, the question mark, is just this tiny stuff, and sometimes even that doesn't exist, no? So the difference between this, the difference between this, no? My God, between this, the difference between this, you see? The knowing body, the question mark there, like small stuff like that, small cacao, and this, which it takes, the form is the concretization of this process, no?